Shout out to Cayenne Cleanse, Cuddles Crib, CC. Pretty good kombucha here. Hey, so today I'm going to talk about a fragrance called Marbert Homme from 1988. Shout out to Geddy Lee. Shout out to Rush. Shout out to Subdivisions. This fragrance reminds me of like a pine forest. Spicy, green. Scentland said it reminds him of an A100, an Audi A100 from the 1980s, those big boat cars. It sort of reminds me of when you go to a club, like Club Shaft back on the Nederlands border between Belgique and Nederlands. Shout out to them. A lot of the older guys that would dress up in suits would smell like this sort of. It doesn't really remind me of 1988 for some reason. The bottle is kind of cool. I like these kind of sprayers. The dry down is what's magical about this. The opening is a little too aromatic for me. Way too aromatic for me. It has that note of galbanum. I just don't know what galbanum smells like. But if you smell a lot of fragrances with the same note, you'll know what it smells like. This has the note of galbanum. Galbanum, it gives it a different kind of vibe for sure. I like it a lot. In the dry down, I don't like the opening. It's just too aromatic for me. I don't think I'll wear it that often. I picked it up for 21 bucks on eBay. It's definitely a cold weather fragrance. Primarily a cold weather fragrance. It reminds me of a tobacco forest. It reminds me of the guys at Club Shaft. Shout out to Club Shaft. You know, that wore this back in the 80s, but it doesn't make sense because this came out in 88. I'm thinking of Club Shaft back in 84. This video sucks. It's kind of like one of those fragrances like, you try it, you might like it. Definitely for the colder weather. I just like the vintage fragrances just to try them. It takes me back to a better time. Shout out to the 80s. Shout out to U.S. Air Force. Shout out to Club Shaft. Don't forget about Club Shaft. Shout out to Belgium. Shout out to the women that loved American soldiers back then. American GIs. We were respected back then. Shout out to Checkpoint Charlie. Shout out to the Berlin Wall. Shout out to everything 80s. Shout out to David Lee Roth, 1984. Not really. I changed my mind on that one. They changed their whole kind of vibe there. Shout out to the best video game of all time, Atari Tempest. Shout out to meeting women in the clubs, asking them to dance when Michael Jackson came on, because every woman wanted to dance during Michael Jackson songs. And it was easy pickings at that point. Hey, would you like to dance? Oh, yeah, Michael Jackson. Easy pickings. Those were the little tricks I had back in the 80s. I had some tricks up my sleeves. You just wait for Michael Jackson to come on. They were tapping their feet. They wanted to dance. Shout out to those women that said, yes, I'll dance with you. And then continued when the slow song came on. Shout out to them. Shout out to the Belgian woman. Shout out to Fritz. Shout out to Friteurs. Shout out to Frickendal Spatial. If you're not from Belgium, you don't know. Curly Fragrance knows. Shout out to her. Shout out to everything good about the 80s. A better time and a better place. Shout out. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to do my best Geddy Lee on there. Sprawling on the fringes of the city in geometric order, an insulated border in between the bright lights and the far unlit unknown.